Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Popcorn Isn't Real with me, your host, Torvald, and
me, your other host, Leif Eric. So today we're going to be talking about Space Camp.
Yeah, so Space Camp, 1986. It was directed by Harry Weiner. The screenplay for Space Camp was by Clifford Green. He's only written 5 things, including Baby's Secret of the Lost Legend the year before.
What?
Yeah, dude. Only the greatest dinosaur movie ever.
I would say that we should find a theory for that movie,
I know,
but then we'd have to watch it.
Well, and I don't know about you, but I certainly don't remember that movie. I only remember the movie we taped over it with.
Yeah.
Just so everybody knows, Baby's Secret of the Lost Legend, very probably little known movie. I doubt anyone's heard of it. Our dad, he took Baby's Secret of the Lost Legend and taped over it with a different movie. He liked it so little that movie was only worth the space that he could use on it.
A little background. Our dad, he liked to make family-friendly edits of movies for us. And he did this using old school method of 2 VCRs, where you can linear edit in real time using 2 VCRs, taping from one to the other and cutting stuff out.
So he would just pause the recording on the one that's recording for any bad part and then restart the recording again when the bad part's over.
And to his credit, he picked out movies that I think were very good for kids, but ultimately did have a lot of things that weren't kid friendly.
Like Terminator.
Most movies, well, Terminator, sure. But it was good
Terminator
that he picked
2,
some of those.
Definitely, though. Terminator 2 is a fantastic kids movie if you take out the gore and stuff.
Yeah, no, it's great. But the Zucker films, right? Zucker and Abrams. Zucker
comedies.
And Abrams.
Yes. He made a lot of really good family
Airplane and Top Secret and stuff like that, which are really the humor in that movie, in those movies, is for the most part
it's very
kid-friendly.
Juvenile humor.
Except for random jokes that are totally adult. So
still juvenile adult humor though.
Right, yeah, that's true. And those movies are great. I love those movies. But what actually happened was that our dad was thinking of editing Top Secret for us. He was like, are there any movies you guys don't like? And I told him, I was like, well, there's this movie, Baby's Secret of the Lost Legend, where it's supposed to be a kid's movie, but the guy swears in it. And as a kid, I was really offended by that. I didn't like that at all. There's a husband and wife team who aren't really getting along very well, and they're talking to some native tribe in Africa.
You remember this movie a lot better than I do. I remember nothing about it.
They're sitting around and the tribe is giving them some soup to eat, and he's like, are there dead ants in this? And then he tastes it and he goes, oh, live ants. Anyway, so
dude, that's a good line. Why would anyone ask, are there dead ants in this? I think
I don't remember
would be the default state for any food.
Well, but as it turned out,
they were not dead.
I don't remember that line exactly. But
maybe they just
anyway,
crawled in. Dude, this movie sounds
set
great.
It down. So he turns to their guide and he starts complaining about his wife, and then the guide says something along the lines of, well, personally, if it were me, I'd whip the bitch. About this guy's wife. And as a kid, that offended me.
Out of place exchange in a kid's movie.
Right. It's an odd thing to say. So I didn't like that as a kid. I thought that wasn't a nice thing for him to say. At least it wasn't the main character saying it about his own wife, but still. And so I told Dad that movie's bad for that reason. And he was like, well, okay. And he just taped over it. I don't know that he had any opinions necessarily about Baby's Secret of the Lost Legend, but I did.
Well, you didn't like it, and you got rid of it forever. It was gone.
Yep.
All right. Well, now
anyway, that's not what
knows
we're
a little
talking
more
about.
Baby's Secret of the Lost Legend. So back to Space Camp. Screenplay was also by Casey T. Mitchell. Another interesting thing about this movie, Joaquin Phoenix, this is his first role, and he was credited as Leaf Phoenix, which I don't know, maybe that was his name.
Yeah, well, his brother is River Phoenix.
Right, they got cool names.
Yeah.
With a last name like Phoenix, you can't go wrong. That's such a cool name, dude. One other interesting thing, and this is, it's a little bit of a dark tone to it, but sadly, the very first time the crew ever viewed the final cut of Space Camp was literally 1 hour after the Challenger disaster, where the Challenger spaceship blew up.
Yes, and that was a problem.
Yeah, and
for their movie.
It's crazy. So the Challenger disaster, it was caused by like a weakened rubber O-ring in the right solid rocket booster, which caused the rocket to break up mid-launch, killing the entire crew, including a teacher who was gonna teach her class from space. Like, dude, that sucks.
Right, and this was a big mission because it was one of the first times like an amateur was going into space.
Yeah, and
arguably this set back space,
not arguably,
like tourism.
Definitively. Like they shut down the space program for 2.5 years after that, and then never even considered ever bringing a civilian ever again.
Only now are we finally getting space tourism.
I know,
kind
it's
of
so
back
sad,
into
dude. Like
the idea
this
of
killed the
brains.
space industry, but amazingly, Space Camp's plot hinges around an error with the right solid rocket booster, which causes the ship to launch with a Space Camp teacher and her class.
Right, so, a bunch of amateur people going in space.
And they went ahead and released it that year on schedule, which you might argue is just, poor timing and horrible taste. But yeah.
Did they release it on schedule?
Yeah,
I thought I read in the IMDb trivia that they did delay it.
I mean, it released, I think, like 6 months later. Same year, though.
Poor director Weiner.
It's really sad. So the movie, it had a poor launch and it made $10 million in theaters. And I'm sure it cost a lot more than that. So it's very sad.
Well, it's very kind of traditional Hollywood style of writing. It is well written. Like every single character has their own little arc. It's suspenseful and it's got a nice resolution and,
I have a few theories about this movie. The main one is that Jinx, he was either trying to hurt or kill or harm people or doing it by accident, but he only started doing it after Max fixed him.
Okay.
He may have been possibly trying to kill everyone in the shuttle, whether on purpose or inadvertently. My other theory is that they all would have died in space.
I mean, the premise is fairly unbelievable, but I can, so you're saying he's like a HAL 9000 like malfunctioning robot computer entity that for whatever reason, maybe with good intentions, basically tried to kill a bunch of people in a spaceship.
Specifically, I'm saying one event in the movie kicked off his murderous rampage. And that was when he got broken by all the teenagers who were yelling commands at him and then fixed by Max. So just a little background on this movie. It's about a space camp. There's this lady astronaut named Andy who's never actually been to space, I think.
Yeah, she's never been to space.
They make friends with this robot, and then they go to a shuttle, which is going to do like a test run of its engines. The robot causes it to malfunction, and it blasts off into space. They got to find their way back. That's the movie. When they introduce this robot, the robot's name is Jinx, and the young boy is named Max, okay? Jinx, they say, is a prototype maintenance droid for the space station. And this is interesting. So this movie is actually like, it's not our world. It is a sci-fi world because there is some random space station called the Daedalus Space Station, which does not exist in real life.
Nope.
And there are sentient robots like Jinx.
Right. But interestingly enough, the space station is under construction, so it's not very far in the future,
Right. It's not a future sci-fi movie with high tech or anything. It is our world, but with two extra things, which is a space station and a robot.
Right. And of course, in our world now, we do have space stations and robots.
Yeah, not robots like Jinx. They say he was a maintenance droid for the space station, but he's not going up because they, quote unquote, blew it on his shielding. I'm not sure what that means. I guess maybe radiation from the sun can cause damage to him. I don't know.
Maybe like shielding from peer pressure. And that's why you couldn't ignore all the people.
That's a reasonable explanation based on how he acts in this movie. But they say specifically his chips become unpredictable after about 2 hours.
Okay.
I don't know what that means. 2 hours of what? Because he's always running.
Watching this movie, I think what that means is that it was written by people who don't understand robots or computers.
The interesting thing here is that they seem to think that Jinx is amazing and interesting because he is a robot. What is actually amazing and interesting about Jinx is his artificial intelligence.
Yes.
Like, it literally doesn't matter what body you put his intelligence into. His artificial intelligence is insane. Like, nothing like that exists. Right. He is, as we talked about before, an artificial general intelligent robot.
Right. And I'm sure you will talk about this later, but in their world, there is another artificially intelligent
Yes.
computer called
Sorry.
NASA.
Yeah, that was another thing for this sci-fi world. There is artificial intelligence, and it's in robots and computers. So
Right. And it's not impressive. Good shielding would have been impressive, but, AI, whatever.
Right, like this robot, they built it, and then we're just like, okay, whatever. Let's have him do random tasks around. Like, he doesn't do anything. He just rolls around talking to people and handing
Right.
them
What he
wrenches
says,
sometimes.
in your hand.
Yep.
As a kid, I thought that was hilarious.
Dude, me too.
Oh, that was the funniest joke.
Our viewers have no idea how often we quoted that line.
Oh my goodness.
And still do.
It's so funny. It was in his hand because he put it in his hand. That's where it
Dude.
was.
Well, that takes me to my next point. So, right about that part of the movie, they say, he's such a complex piece of machinery, NASA hasn't been able to iron out all the bugs. He's the world's only $27 million handyman. He's also quite literal. And that's important for this theory.
Just backing up slightly, there was one thing I wanted to say just before this when she meets all of her students. So when Andy meets Tish, she is not very nice in that scene to
She
Tish.
wasn't nice to anyone.
Where Tish is like, says something about like, I want to, search for intelligent life. And then staring right at Tish, she says, I know the feeling,
Yeah.
implying that Tish is unintelligent. And Tish totally notices too. Like the actor kind of gives her a look, This is actually why I liked Andy, is I feel she's actually a very complex character. But if she were just a nice teacher, I wouldn't be interested in her. But because she's like taking revenge on Leah Thompson's character just right off the bat,
Okay.
I'm like, wow, this lady is like serious.
Let's walk through this whole scene because I got a lot to say about this scene. So, and this has nothing to do with my theory, by the way. She's talking to all of her students that will be in her class, and she talks to Catherine, who is Leah Thompson. Catherine loves her. Catherine knows who she is and is like, wow, it's you. What are you doing here? And then, she asks Catherine what she wants to do. And Catherine's like, I want to be the shuttle commander. And she's like, you're the pilot.
First of all, though, we have to talk about, so Leah Thompson's character, she knows who Andy is. She knows who Andy is and thinks she's great and knows that Andy is an amazing pilot for NASA who wants to be the first woman in space, right? And then she asks her the question, what are you doing here? Which, of course, is like a jab at Andy, whether she intended it or not, because what is she doing at space camp? She was supposed to be in space right now, but she wasn't let into space, so she has to be at space camp. So, of course, Andy is insulted by that.
Yeah, but isn't that a valid question still? Like whether it's a jab
whether
or
it was
not,
intentional
it's
or
up to her
not.
to take
But
it as
then
offensive.
when Andy's talking to Leah Thompson says, I want to be the first woman pilot in space, which Leah Thompson knows is what Andy wants to do. And Andy is way further in her career than Leah Thompson is, right?
Yeah.
So I think understandably, Andy who is already in a bad mood, gets in a worse mood because of that comment.
Dude, no.
Whether
this
it was
is like going up to Michael Jordan in his
slight or
prime,
not.
and you know that Michael Jordan wants to score 200 baskets in one game, and then he says, "So what do you want to do, kid?" And you say, "I want to be the first athlete to score 200 baskets in one game." It's not offensive just because you want to do it too,
Well,
right?
It is if Michael Jordan was just fired from being a pro basketball player to go to like basketball player camp with a bunch of little kids. Well, I think that Andy is a very complex and interesting character. And what I liked about that part with Leah Thompson, she's trying to actually teach Leah Thompson a lesson, which is the same lesson that she has had to learn, is that you don't always get what you want. She wanted to be in space. She can't go to space. So she's going to teach Leah Thompson that you're not going to be the first captain. You're going to be the pilot or whatever.
Yeah, well, Leah Thompson is pursuing a career path, and it's not up to Andy to decide Leah Thompson's career path.
Well, but it is. She's the teacher. It is up to her to decide her career path because she's the one who chooses their career paths.
Catherine is there because she wants to learn about this one specific aspect of space travel so that she can do it later in her life.
But she is also there to try to teach them things, right? She probably sees that Kevin maybe needs a little bit more leadership skills, and so she gives him the leadership position. The one thing we know about Leah Thompson is that she is a good pilot. She flies to space camp in an airplane. And by the way, space camp apparently has a runway next to its parking lot. Just in case you wanted to fly there. I think it makes sense that she puts Leah Thompson in the role of pilot, right? Because Leah Thompson is a pilot.
I think it makes no sense because Leah Thompson is there to learn a skill, and that skill is not what she's being allowed to learn.
Right, but I'm saying this makes her, I think, a good character because she is consistent in her emotion. She didn't get what she wanted, and now none of these kids are going to get what they want.
Hey, did I say she's not a good character?
Right.
She is definitely a good character.
She may
She's
be
just a horrible
not
person.
the nicest person, but I like her as a character.
She was also really mean to Trish, like you said, and she wasn't very nice to Rudy either. She treated him
she was not nice to Rudy.
And it's the worst because she treats Trish like an idiot. And it turns out Trish is actually extremely intelligent.
Trish is really smart.
She's the smartest person there, and nothing ever comes from that. All right, back to my theory. At one point in the movie, Jinx is hiding in Max's closet for unknown reasons. I don't know why Jinx just hangs out in Max's closet.
Max put him there.
Yeah,
because they were like,
why is
Max
he allowed
has got
to do
something
this?
in there.
It seems like people would have stuff for
I
Jinx
don't think he's
to
allowed
do.
to. I think that's why he was hiding him in the closet. Like, he wasn't supposed to have the robot there.
Okay, and then for the next 3 scenes in a row, he's back in the closet all the time. It seems like Jinx should have things to do other than hide in the closet all day.
No, it is odd that no one cares about this robot.
Yes, he's a $22 million robot. People should care. So he's in Max's closet. Everyone starts yelling commands at him, and he breaks because he gets too many commands. This robot should be able to process multiple commands without breaking.
Right.
He sparks and shuts down. It's not even like he crashes and needs a reboot. He physically breaks.
He has literal hardware problems.
I mean, I get it's true. His chips become unstable. They weren't lying. This is hardware, not software. I mean, maybe a bit of both. Max takes him and fixes him. As he's fixing Jinx, he says, "What a bunch of monkey clowns." He's talking about the boys who broke Jinx. He says, "They ought to be zapped." Jinx, now fixed, starts to leave, and Max says, "Hey, where you going?" And Jinx says, "To zap them," while spraying sparks everywhere. So once again, here's a example of Jinx taking things literally. So this is where Max fixes Jinx, and Jinx goes haywire. Up to this point, Jinx had never showed any animosity or even ability to hurt anyone. The instant he's fixed, he rolls off to go and kill some kids. So there you go.
Yes.
That's the start of my theory.
Is that also the end of your theory? 'Cause
more or less.
seems pretty much confirmed.
Yep. No, okay. I got a few more points. Just so this scene wraps up with Max. He kind of gives Jinx a hug, and he says, "You're really neat, Jinx." And Jinx says, "You too, Max." And then Max says, "Friends forever." And Jinx says, "Friends forever." Now remember, Jinx takes things literally.
Right.
So Jinx, he's in Max's closet again. He tells Kevin a secret way to get to the launch pad so he can go on a date with Catherine. But then Andy comes looking for Kevin because he's skipping out on curfew. And Jinx tells Andy where Kevin is. Oh no! They catch him and Catherine skipping curfew. Kevin comes home, chews out Max, and Jinx is listening this whole time. Max runs away to be alone, and Jinx follows him. At this point, Max says, "I wish I were far away. I wish I were anywhere except for here. I wish I was in space." And then he cries and says, "I wish I was in space," over and over. Jinx is watching this, and then he wheels away. Max and Jinx never interact with or see each other again after this point of the movie. So that was interesting because I thought this kid and this robot did a lot more together than that.
Nope.
That's it for their relationship pretty much.
I mean, yeah. And as far as the robot is concerned, Max is going to die, but he will get his wish.
Yeah, they'll be friends forever. Okay. So Jinx then goes to talk to a sentient computer called NASA.
Yep.
This computer is the most strange mystery of the movie. I don't know what this computer is, why it always sits in a dark room being unused, why someone installed
why
a
it talks
sentient
like
computer.
the master control program.
Yeah, no, this computer is very strange, but only Jinx ever uses it. Jinx says, "Put Max in space," and NASA says, "There is no Max listed in astronaut program." Interesting thing to note.
There is now.
Yes, then Jinx says, "There is now." This has no effect on the movie. It doesn't matter that Jinx put Max into the astronaut program. That literally makes no difference in the movie. So I don't know why that scene
But
was
also,
included.
that robot can just plug into a port and just add people to the astronaut program, apparently.
Yeah, Jinx is pretty powerful.
I know this was the 80s, but they apparently don't have any,
Security.
Yeah.
Well, either that or maybe Jinx can connect to the key store, get the key that he needs to elevate his privileges or log into someone else's account. He can get the admin account access or something. I don't know. We don't know how Jinx does this, but NASA, the computer, scrolls through a list of people while it's searching the database. It seems to be a real list of actual astronauts. It includes some deceased astronauts that I checked, and they are actually dead, or they were at the time of the movie. That list does include one member of the Challenger crew, Ronald E. McNair, and it did not list him as deceased. It listed him as flight.
Okay. Well, that's good.
So anyway, that's interesting. Jinx is talking to NASA about possibilities of getting NASA into space. He says, how can we change engine test into liftoff? NASA says, worst case scenario, thermal curtain failure. He describes that if one engine has a thermal curtain failure, they will explode or be forced to ignite the second booster and launch.
Yeah.
Jinx doesn't seem to, I mean, he kind of a little objects. Like he says it's unacceptable for them to explode, but then immediately goes along with it. Like he asks, what's the possibility of a thermal curtain failure? And then NASA says one will happen every 4.9 million years.
Right.
At which
Max
point Jinx
won't live
says,
that
Max
long."
won't live that long. Max needs thermal curtain failure. Max and Jinx friends forever.
This robot is insane.
Right.
It's a homicidal robot.
Well, he wants to either send Max to space or kill him. He knows that that is the outcome here.
Yeah.
Either space or death. And he seems to be reassuring himself by saying Max and Jinx friends forever. I don't know. I think
Well, like even if Max dies, we're still friends.
right, exactly. And also, if Max dies, they can never not be friends because Max can't change that.
Yeah.
He says to NASA, Max needs thermal curtain failure. Then he jacks into NASA again and says, thermal curtain failure, Max and Jinx friends forever. So the right engine starts to fail, and just at the very last second, they decide to initiate the launch sequence and avoid the explosion.
Yeah. I know we've already talked about how this NASA computer is a little bit confusing, but like it can access a shuttle that is far away and cause it to have problems.
Yeah, I know.
Against the will, presumably, of any technicians or anyone else working on that shuttle, right?
Yep.
Like it can cause thermal curtain failure remotely. So that's just strange.
This is not a very safe system that they have going on here. We'll put it that way. Just to continue with my theory, I have to mention this. This kind of sort of counteracts my theory, but Jinx does show that he is interested in Max's survival. He's talking to NASA later, and NASA tells him re-entry to landing will be 14 hours, but estimated oxygen supply is only 11 hours and 56 minutes. Jinx asks, Max will erase? And then NASA says, probability 100%. And then Jinx says, get Max out of space now. How? So he does not want Max to die, I guess, if he can help it.
But he is a malfunctioning robot who caused a problem with the shuttle that had a very high likelihood of killing everyone in it.
Yes. And then even if the problem didn't kill them, the following events would kill them, right? Like he put them in space with no oxygen. Like everything about this was designed to kill them. Interesting thing here, NASA says NASA is working on the problem. Jinx says NASA needs help and then exposes some lights in his body. I don't know what he's doing. I guess he's like adding his CPU power to NASA to help them solve the problem. But I guess they didn't come up with anything because the next time we see Jinx, several scenes later, he's just wandering around aimlessly outside mission control saying, Jinx, help NASA, Jinx, help NASA, over and over. Yeah. He's not helping
Those
NASA.
Those were just lights. It didn't do anything.
Right.
Like he realized that at some point.
I think this is a good evidence that he is broken. Like he's just wandering around outside saying, Jinx, help NASA. He's not helping NASA. Jinx bursts into mission control. He's shouting, Jinx, put Max in space. Jinx will get Max back, over and over.
Just confessing to his crime.
Right. And I don't know what he plans to do. He has no plan. So Andy's husband says, how'd you know about Max, Jinx? And he says, Jinx and Max friends forever. It has nothing to do with that. The students are trying to contact mission control using Morse code.
Right. They have no radio, so they can't talk to them.
Jinx sees it and says, yo, Max. I don't know why. I mean, I guess he makes the connection that is at least the student's trying to communicate. It is not Max, but I don't know why he thinks Max can hear him. Security comes, they start to pick up Jinx. Andy's husband says, "Wait a minute, Jinx, how can you help NASA?" Jinx just starts reading letters from the Morse code. He says COMEINCONTROL, COMEINCONTROL, and then he reads them and says, "Come in control, Max's code." And then luckily, Andy's husband says, "Morse code."
Morse code. And then he corrects him again and says, Max's code. Some very key parts of this robot's programming were replaced with the word Max.
Right. Well, okay. So that's about the end of the movie. He says, "Jinx, I'm treating you to a can of oil." Jinx opens his mouth, doesn't say anything. Mission Control gets the message, and then it just cuts back to Jinx, who's just swiveling his head left and right, and that's the last we see of him. So my theory here is just that from what I've told you, Jinx, I guess we can call it mental state, was degrading seriously from the point he was fixed. And at the point that he comes to Mission Control, he is no longer a functional robot. He's just repeating things and shouting Max, right? Like nothing is working right in his brain anymore. Right. Like he burst in there with no plan to do anything except confess, I guess. Like right. He's just lucky he happened to see that button and realize it was Morse code. That definitely wasn't his plan. And also, yeah, I mean, there's no way he could have known that. He came there with no purpose.
Right. I mean, and also this does not redeem him in any way.
No,
that he saves them because he
caused
put them there.
Thing.
Like, you don't put someone in mortal peril then save them and be like, "I'm the hero." No.
Yep, that pretty much wraps it up for my theory about Jinx. He is a very broken robot, and he broke exactly when they broke him. And Max tried to fix him. But of course, Max is just a little kid. He doesn't know how to fix this robot. How would he know how to fix this robot? And this is, by the way, my best evidence is that there's zero possible way that Max could have fixed Jinx.
Well, like all he has is like a screwdriver, right?
Yes, he has one screwdriver and he just screws something.
Quite possibly Max did nothing.
We don't know what Max did, but either Jinx was broken then or probably Max broke him more.
Well, I think that's a great theory, and I agree with you. That is one malfunctioning, murderous robot.
Yes. So I also have the theory that they would have died in space. Basically, once they got into space, Leah Thompson said, we're going to die. And then the hippie girl, Tish, she says, "We're already dead." I think they were already dead by that point.
Right. You could do a they were actually dead the whole time theory.
Okay. So there's this guy named Chris Haugen. He wrote like a one-page report about Space Camp, and it happens to be hosted on some university's website. He says there are some key problems with Space Camp. When they lift off, Catherine doesn't get buckled in and crashes into the
that's a
floor
problem.
Right. He says that she would have died. When taking off, the shuttle puts 3 Gs on the astronauts. And since she fell from the top to the back of the shuttle in 3 times Earth gravity, she would have been seriously hurt. And if Catherine was dead or injured, she couldn't have piloted them home and they would have died. Maybe Andy could have done it, but Andy was incapacitated, so.
Right.
The oxygen tank, bigger than any oxygen tank that a scuba diver would ever use, right? Like it's huge, and it bursts open and slams Andy into the wall of the payload bay. It should have crushed her. Like the amount of force coming from this giant compressed oxygen tank would have really seriously hurt her, which it did.
Yes.
I mean, she did fall unconscious, but then she got better right away. She should have probably been dead. Also, it should have pushed them off course, because the force of this oxygen pushing the ship would have made it move, going by Newton's third law. Another problem is when they set up for re-entry, they go into a spin, and Catherine has trouble getting out of the spin, and then all of a sudden it's just magically fixed.
Right.
Chris Haugen says that wouldn't happen. They couldn't just magically fix it like that, and also even if they did, that spin would have put them way off course from where they were trying to land. They wouldn't have been at White Sands anymore, and they would have had nowhere to land.
Yeah.
Last thing he says is that when they're landing, Catherine is trying to maintain an angle of attack at 30 degrees. In real life, you want an angle of attack at 40 degrees because any less and the orbiter skips off the Earth's atmosphere like a rock in a pond when you're skipping stones and bounces back into space.
Uh-oh.
He says this would make a
Don't want
huge
that.
problem because they would bounce back into space at 30 degrees and never return to Earth since the orbit would have been off. They would have had too flat of an orbit. They would have had to somehow like get further away and come back in, and they were probably running out of oxygen. And all of those problems show that no matter what, they would have died in space. Both of the pilots got seriously injured and incapacitated or dead. And the pilot, when she did try to land them, did it wrong.
So perhaps the end of the movie is Jinx's hero fantasy.
Maybe. We don't know what's going on in the mind of that robot. But,
they died when they were launched. The rest of the movie is in Jinx's head.
well, he could have imagined himself being a lot smarter and cooler than. But
Yeah.
he didn't
But
actually.
he's very literal.
It's true. He is very literal. So I really like survival movies, and I really like kids movies, and I always have and I always will have a thing for robots. I just gotta say, I really do like Space Camp. I think it is a really fun survival movie for kids with a robot in it. So what's not to like, right?
It's got everything.
Whatever I have to say about Space Camp, I actually think it's a good movie. I like it.
Space Camp is enhanced by the fact that, now we know the robot was a
Right,
psychopath.
it's like a precursor HAL 9000, like you said. Like this robot is going off the rails for, for the rest of the movie after it gets damaged.
Right.
Cool.
All right.
All right. Well, this has been The Popcorn Isn't Real with me, Torvald, my brother Leif Eric.
Thank you so much for listening. Opening music for this episode was provided by Christine.
And remember,
The popcorn isn't real.